On June 5th, the government unveiled PENJANA, the nation's economic recovery plan, which included measures to revive and rehabilitate the economy. Now, together with a 35 billion ringgit stimulus package, all eyes are on PENJANA, with much debate on whether it will be able to pull up and defibrillate the economy. Now, joining us today on The Nation in the Bernama studios, we have the honour of speaking to Yang Berhormat Mulia Tengku Dato Sri Zafrul, Finance Minister of Malaysia, on his thoughts and plans. Thank you, Minister, for joining us today. Apa khabar?
Baik, thank you, Nadia, for having me.
You're welcome. Now, let's get straight into it to address, of course, the elephant in the room. You've made a name for yourself in the corporate sphere. You've been known as a corporate finance leader, an investment banker. Now, what made you decide to make possibly the largest change in your career on the 9th of March? How has the journey been?
Thank you, Nadia. That's a very tough question to start this interview. Yes, 9th of March was a historical day for me and, of course, for my fellow cabinet members. It's the day we, started work, sworn in by the Yang di-Pertuan Agong. It has been very challenging, I must admit, but also satisfying. The reason why I took this opportunity to play a part in the government is because I believe that so far, for me, for myself, and for my family, we have benefited a lot from this country, and I think it's time to give back. Right? I hope with me here, I will do whatever I can to assist in any way I can in economic recovery for Malaysia.
Certainly a big challenge and not the envy of many, so we wish you, of course, all the best, Tengku.
Thank you.
Now, Minister, we can't talk about PENJANA without talking first about Prihatin. Now, the Prihatin Rakyat Economic Stimulus Package was possibly your first litmus test, and I was told that it had to be developed in record time. That was 5 days, to be exact. Now, where are we at in terms of the perlaksanaan of Prihatin?
Thank you. Yes, Prihatin was the first stimulus package after the government came in. In fact, we have three. We had Prihatin, Prihatin Plus, right? And we had, of course, last Friday, PENJANA. Prihatin was a work that was done, coordinated by Ministry of Finance with the assistance of various other agencies and ministries, and as well as the private sector. I think my colleagues at the Cabinet has also been instrumental in assisting the success of Prihatin and, of course, PENJANA. The key is the pelaksanaan or the execution. So I, together with my colleagues at Ministry of Finance, have been updating the people on the status of the execution on a weekly basis. Right? Of course, the monitoring is done on a daily basis. At Prihatin package, we have announced a big number. Right, 260 billion ringgit, which includes fiscal stimulus, including measures that improve liquidity, measures concerning financing, but more importantly, it is measures that include both the private and public sectors. I think that's key, and because when it comes to delivery of the initiatives under Prihatin, government alone can't do it. We need the support of the rakyat, of course, but in the delivery, we also need the support of the private sector. So, and the relevant government agencies. We've seen EPF in the picture, we've seen Tenaga, the telcos as well, and many other private sector involvement in this Prihatin. And similarly for PENJANA. Execution is going to be key. The reason why we do have this weekly reporting is because it promotes not just transparency but also accountability, where we ensure that any updates are shared with the public, and also any complaints or feedback is also shared with the public, so action can be taken. In all the plans, agility is going to be key. Right? In Prihatin, we've seen that. That's why we had the Prihatin Plus. Right? We announced Prihatin first, and then followed by response and feedback that we receive from SME sector especially, which is an important sector to the country. We then improvise given what the feedback that we receive, and did what we needed to do to ensure that the companies, especially the SME and the rakyat, navigate well.
We could see that from your touch point, especially your most recent FB update, not only on Laksana, but your phone call with the, what do we call that, marinated lamb
yes.
micro entrepreneur. So it's good to see that there is real time and real case studies on how things are happening. Now, if I were to ask you to backtrack a little bit, could you tell us a little bit about what PENJANA represents? What are the three main key thrusts and that mammoth 40 initiatives that come together with PENJANA?
Thank you. But before I start with the PENJANA, maybe I'll give you a bit of a background, right? We had announced, as you said, Prihatin. During Prihatin, we have also announced that this is part of the 6R, right?
Yes.
First R being the fact that we want to resolve the issue. So that's when we announced the CMO on the 18th of March. Well, the beginning of the 18th of March, where CMO started. That's to contain the virus, right? Number of cases, to flatten the curve, to ensure that the healthcare system is there, it's not under stress. So Prihatin was the second R, which is resilience. To ensure the resilience is the focus on people, the rakyat, and of course SMEs in particular, which is the business. So similar three pillars to stimulate the economy. And the third was the restart. So because on 4th of May, the decision was to restart the economy. Well, we've seen after 1 month, right, how the economy has progressed. We started off with 6 million workers going back to work, then 10 million. Today we have close to 2.7 million workers back to work. That's about 85% of the working population, which is good, right? With over a month, businesses are reopening, restarting, people are starting to go back to work. But there are challenges, right? So package PENJANA is to address some of these challenges when it comes to restarting the economy. Why? Because we want to ensure that this recovery happens quickly. We want to ensure that the recovery is a V-shaped recovery. So PENJANA is there to assist that. The 40 initiatives announced by the Prime Minister with regards to PENJANA is focusing. If you look at the elements and the focus of this 40 initiative is to help restart the economy. It's a 6 months, in terms of time horizon, it's a 6-month plan until end of the year. So the PENJANA is the 4th R. And of course, the other 2 R is revitalizing the economy, which is the budget 2021, which will be announced end of the year. And then in early next year, where the government will then announce the 12th Malaysia plan, which is a longer term plan, which is a 5-year plan.
So we're talking about resolving, resilience, restarting, recovering, revitalizing, and the last R, reform.
Yes.
Okay. Now, Minister, most of us are still grappling with this idea. For the longest time, we've been told that the company is in deficit. There was a lot of money that was lost. And yet, Prihatin and PENJANA combined will be looking at the government pumping and allocating some 295 billion back to the rakyat and the economy. So, for the layperson and for myself, can you help explain this a little bit?
Okay. Well, I think it's important to look forward. We need to look at where our finances are, government finances. Fiscal deficit, beginning of the year, when the budget was presented, the target was around 3+, right? Last year, I think we ended up fiscal deficit around 3.4%.
Yes.
But today, we are in uncharted territory, not just for us, the world, globally. People are facing unprecedented challenges, unprecedented times. So we need to ensure that the solutions to mitigate the impact to the people must address this, right? So if you look at Prihatin, our fiscal deficit is projected to increase around 4.7 to 5%, depending on what the GDP number is, but that's the range. And PENJANA, our deficit will go up further to around 5.8 to 6%. In terms of the number is huge, as you said, 295 billion ringgit in terms of the package itself, but the government's fiscal injection amounts to 45 billion ringgit, 35 billion ringgit for Prihatin and another 10 billion ringgit for PENJANA, right? So it is a number that we feel is important to restart and to stimulate the economy.
So Malaysia can afford this?
Malaysia can afford this. If you look historically, in 2009, the budget deficit did go up even higher than 6%. It was at 6.7%.
That's right.
But what is important is that we have the fiscal discipline and the political will. Once the economy improves, we must also have a fiscal consolidation policy where we reduce that number. And Malaysia has a good track record on this with regard to this. Our GDP in 2009, when it was at 6.7%, did go down in a couple of years, 3+%. right, within 5 years. So perhaps this time we can do it in a shorter
So
time
in
frame.
your projected V-shaped recovery, we're looking at potentially a shorter time frame for that, hopefully, inshallah?
Yes.
Okay, now we're talking about Malaysia's government debt, and we know that that's by and large regulated by 3 statutory debt limits. You're talking about our domestic debt, our external debt, and our conventional treasury bills, right? Last year in 2019, the government issued 135.2 billion in gross debt, and this of course comprised 94.5 of domestic borrowings, 5.5 of samurai bond foreign borrowings. Now under our local act, our government funding act, for example, we have statutory debt limits of 55%.
Yeah.
And of course, if we're looking at the rest, for example, the Loans Act and the Treasury Bill Act 1946, there are other limits as well. So could you share with us a little bit, would you help break it down? What are our actual thresholds? And with PENJANA and Prihatin, what would be our basically country debt to GDP ratio after this?
Yeah. So today, just for the layman, let me explain it in very layman terms. The budget, the debt over GDP today is around 52%. The statutory limit is 55%. Whether we will go above that depends on the execution of PENJANA and of course the execution of Prihatin and what the GDP number will be, right? But if it goes up higher than 55, we have to go to Parliament before that to get approval. And we are quite certain that we need to ensure that the fiscal discipline happens. But even if we go to Parliament to get the increase in the limit, the 55% statutory limit, it has to be, in my view, a temporary one, given the, what I said, unprecedented times, the challenging times that we face today. So perhaps a temporary limit with the focus of reducing it back to below 55% in the near future, right? My time horizon is around 3 years, is be ideal. We also have, you mentioned the samurai bond, so we also have a limit for foreign borrowings. The limit, statutory limit for foreign borrowings is around 35 billion ringgit. Right, we are below that. We are around 30 billion ringgit. So of course we have the capacity to borrow foreign currency more. That's around 2 to 3%, as you correctly pointed out. But what's key is that we have to ensure that we have enough liquidity in the market, which we do. Right, we are tapping the local bond markets, especially MGS and MGII. That's where we'll be mostly using local borrowings to fund this, but we will not be using any foreign borrowings to fund the deficit.
So the game plan is looking internally first, and if we do have to raise that debt ceiling, we will do it only as a temporary measure and not something that is long term, and you're looking at a 3-year recovery plan for this to be able to get back on track, correct?
Correct.
Yes, great. So now, based on the data and projection, we are looking at approximately 2 million jobs. That's approximately 8% of the workforce that will be impacted by year end. Now, the Empower People thrust of PENJANA, I believe, looks at beyond just saving jobs and saving livelihoods. You earlier talked about the importance of public-private partnership. You're talking about the agility and resilience of the rakyat. Now, how does the government intend to reach the most marginalized with the Empower People thrust?
Well, let me first address your first sentence regarding the unemployment. Unemployment officially today, the latest number by the Department of Statistics Malaysia is around 3.9%. That's end of March, right? That's probably, if I'm not mistaken, if my memory serves me correctly, is around 610,000 people. I think the official forecast of the Department of Statistics of Malaysia is around 5.5%. I think the 8% number is a worst case scenario in my view, and I think that's been mitigated by the various initiatives that the government has announced. For example, the wage subsidy. The wage subsidy today has benefited 2.3 million workers, right? I'm not saying that we saved these 2.3 million workers jobs, but definitely we must have saved many of those as government initiatives, incentive when it comes to wage subsidy has helped companies to keep these workers in their jobs. That costs money, right? The wage subsidy program is budgeted to cost the government close to if I'm not mistaken, just Prihatin alone, and this about together PENJANA around close to 16.8 billion ringgit of wage subsidy to help employees and of course companies to keep them. We have, as you said, looking at hiring as well. So hiring subsidy is also in place in PENJANA because we want to make sure that companies do continue to employ Malaysians, and that is being allocated around 1.5 billion ringgit. But what's also important is to ensure that we reskill our people, right?
Yes.
Upskill. So when unemployment goes up, these people who are unemployed should be reskilled and upskilled, and also match. The job matching should also be there. That government has allocated around 2 billion ringgit.
When you said reskilling, I think quite a key part of that is digitization.
Yes.
You were talking about how do we get used to the new way of working, the new way of doing things. Now, PENJANA also looks at that, not only creating more ways of flexi work arrangements and working from home, but you've also talking about digitization of government processes and services. So could you share a little bit about digitization under PENJANA, please?
Thank you. Yes. What's the background? Again, let me just share you the background, right? Digitization is important. It is, of course, preparing our countrymen and Malaysians to Industry 4.0, right? We need to make sure we future-proof the country. But we've seen how digitization has been accelerated during this period, especially during MCO.
Necessity being the mother of all inventions.
Correct, exactly. When we asked, there was a joke that people are asking, what is the reason behind company embracing digitization the last 2 months? Is it the CEO? Is it the chief CFO or the chief data officer? But the answer is actually COVID. Right?
Yes, the paksa.
The paksa, correct. So we've seen that based on some reports, there are 40% of Malaysians who have never embraced e-commerce before have now started to embrace that. People are saying it's the new normal, but my question is that really a new normal? It could be a permanent normal, because once people have gets accustomed to or get comfortable using online services, buying products online, they might be they will continue, right? Regardless whether we have whether COVID-19 is over. I mean, when we find a vaccine, for example, people are used to doing things in the new ways.
But if I were to ask you this question, does not the position that we're in, would digitization not create a larger divide between those that have and have not?
Yeah, well, it depends on how you look at it, right? Of course, digital divide is here, right? We need to narrow that digital divide. I think what we have done here in these packages is more short-term in in nature. There will be structural issues that has to be addressed in the mid to long term. Internet accessibility is going to be key, right? Even if we have the right devices, the right initiative, but if we don't have the right internet coverage, then that will be a challenge, right? So that's something we are looking at together with the other ministries, the relevant ministries. So the government is looking at that. But in the short to medium term, especially the next 6 months, what is going to be important is we must train the people, especially SMEs. SMEs are a very integral part of the economy. They employ 70% of the workforce, contributes about 38% of the GDP to the economy. We must train as many SMEs as possible to be comfortable and understand the importance of digitization, digitalizing their business. Right?
So as a follow-up to what you're saying, let's talk about social assistance and health support for the vulnerable, for example.
Okay.
Now, I'm mindful that very often when we make comments, we're making comments from really a privileged standpoint. How are we planning to reach the truly vulnerable community beyond short-termism, beyond CSR and public handouts? How do we really teach them how to fish and be able to enable and empower them so that we can move in the direction that we all want to?
Yeah. Because if you look at, you're right, the announcements that the government has made in both Prihatin and PENJANA do try as much as we can to assist the vulnerable sector, and even the M40, right? The B40 definitely has always been our focus. We had the Bantuan Prihatin Nasional and to assist them. Even PENJANA, we focus on a few of the segments that we feel are affected. But in the mid-term to longer term, you're right, we need to ensure that we equip them with the right skill set, with the right support to ensure that they do move up in terms of their skill set, so that they can continue to support themselves. Right. So the skilling and reskilling, on, of course, upskilling of Malaysians in the PENJANA package is important. It is a basis that we are going to start off with. Ministry of Human Resources working closely with us on this, and I think it's going to be a measure that's going to be sustained throughout, even post PENJANA, even post this pandemic, because we need to continuously invest in human capital, especially our Malaysians.
I love the fact that you're talking about the need to invest and reinvest in our human capital. With that, let's segue to the gig economy. Now, it's refreshing to see that PENJANA has a segment, in fact, 250 million ringgit that's going to be injected into the gig economy. Now, the gig economy is not something new. It's been around for at least, 10 years now.
Yes.
But does Malaysia have the correct systems and infrastructure in place to support giggers and the economy?
Well, we've seen how the gig economy in Malaysia have grown. It's grown tremendously, actually, and more so in recent years. Whether this is sustained, I think yes, because the reason why gig economy is getting bigger by the day is because of the changes in customer behavior, right? Changes in people's behavior, right? So if the companies don't adapt fast enough, I think the gig economy has shown that they will take that space, right?
They will take over.
They will take over, and we've seen it, right? And at the end of the day, I think it's how fast the changes will be in terms of our own behavior, right? And how fast can people who provide the services change as well to adapt to this new normal, in this case for the COVID. But in the midterm to long term, I do believe that will be that. The good thing about gig economy is people are sort of doing things themselves. It's being about being entrepreneurial, it's about self-employment, but more importantly, it's about the ability to be doing things very quickly, right?
One of the hallmarks of the PENJANA package is the fact that it highlights and re-emphasizes the need of public, private, social enterprise partnerships across the board, which is very different from just waiting for the government to give a handout and then do something about it. You clearly articulated this several times, that to be able to revitalize the economy and to defibrillate where we're at right now, we all have to come together.
Yes.
Now, in your FB Live session on the 9th of June, you spoke on the need of Malaysians to rally together, to upskill, be agile and resilient. Truly, Minister, what is the measure of success for PENJANA? What should we be looking for? You're big on impact and outcome, so what should we be looking for? Yeah.
Well, again, the PENJANA and Prihatin, we have a list of KPIs that we have to meet. But you're right, the most important part of the KPI is not how much money we have disbursed, right? But what is the outcome, right? Of course, the direct fiscal injection, we have made a few projections in terms of how it will impact GDP growth, and we have seen the money going into the pockets of the Malaysians, and we hope based on that there will be a certain multiplier to that. Every incentive there will be a multiplier impact that we have forecast, and hence we think that both packages, Prihatin and PENJANA, will contribute between around 3.3% to the GDP, right? That's going to be quite good if it's done properly. But if you look at the main outcome, is really to ensure that our economy is protected as much as we can. Our people, especially the vulnerable sector, is protected as much as we can as we go through the tough period, especially when the economy was shut down. Right now it's opened up. People are going back to work. Like I said, what do we do now is to ensure what is the outcome that we want is to get the companies and people back at work. And to show that Malaysians can achieve this V-shaped recovery.
I'm going to be devil's advocate before we close. I've got two more questions for you. Without PENJANA and Prihatin, if that is not in the cards, would we be able to weather this storm?
Well, if you look at the numbers in terms of COVID cases, it has gone down to single digit. I think, if I'm not mistaken, yesterday was 2. Right.
We've also had a day without any local infections.
Yes, that's right. So, yes, so on the health side, I think we've done very well. So the government has, I think, managed to contain, and in fact, not just flatten the curve, but has brought the curve down. But the economy it has also started to show improvement, right? Because at the end of the day, it is a balance between lives and also livelihoods, right?
Yes.
So on the livelihood part, this is where Penjana and Prihatin come into play, right? Because we need to ensure that the challenges faced by Malaysians and the businesses have to be addressed, and they can't do it alone, and we also can't do it alone. So together, the government together with the private sector and the rakyat have to work together to bring back our economy up, and we think that the recovery, given the momentum that we have achieved the last 1 month, when the economy opened up, I'm very optimistic, right? Especially in the third and fourth quarter of the year.
Alhamdulillah, much still to be done, I'm sure, and we look forward to your weekly updates on how things are going.
Thank you.
Now, finally, Minister, if you were to sum up your experience throughout this journey, throughout the MCO, throughout the pandemic, what would be your greatest lesson to date, and what are you most grateful for?
Well, let me start with the grateful part. I'm very grateful of the support given to me by my colleagues at the Ministry of Finance, the various agencies, and also my colleagues at the Cabinet. I think we've worked together as a team, and is key. No one can fight this pandemic alone, right? I think the reason why we've been successful so far is everyone, together with the rakyat, working together in tackling this, right? So that is going to be key, right? So that's, I think, has been the key challenge is to get people to work together, and we've achieved that, right?
Inshallah, we will continue to rally with the government and work together. We are together, one nation, of course. So thank you so much,
Thank you, Nadia.
Yang Berhormat Mulia Tengku Dato Sri Zafrul, for joining us today. Now, he said everything from resolving the issues, being resilient, restarting the economy, recovery, revitalization, and reforming.
Yes.
And of course, he said the most important part is we need to look at together how we are going to be balancing both lives and livelihood. So thank you for being with us on The Nation. I'm Nadia Abdul. Stay tuned.
Saya nak menzahirkan rasa terima kasih kepada anda semua sebagai rakyat Malaysia. Anda adalah manusia yang hebat. Kita ibarat sebuah keluarga yang besar. Kita saling bantu-membantu ketika zaman susah. Inilah nilai sebenar persaudaraan rakyat Malaysia tanpa mengira bangsa.